Welcome to Project tonight, guys. Why don't you go ahead and stand with us here? Your favorite ways within the future. My dreams are small compared to yours. Why should I worry about tomorrow when I know that all I gotta do is trust you, Lord. Every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you will work it out for good. It's every little thing, everything will be alright. Behind the scenes and in the details, you plan the perfect way for me. Why would I dwell upon the roads uncertainties when all I gotta do is look to you? Yeah, all I gotta do is look to you. And every little thing's gonna be alright. Every little thing's gonna be just fine. Whether I can see it now, I know you'll work it out for good. And every little thing, everything will be alright. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Every little thing, everything will be alright. And whether I can see it now, I know you'll work it out for good. And every little thing, everything will be alright. And every little thing, everything will be alright. Every little thing, everything will be alright. Thanks, guys. You can go ahead and take a seat.
It's good that you're here. My name is Thomas. If you haven't been here the last while, or maybe it's the first time, I actually haven't been up here for like the last 6 weeks or so. It's the first time in a while speaking, and kind of like what they already said, I'm finishing off the series we started at the beginning of August called What I Wish I Knew. And I don't know if you know this, but this whole series has actually been based on people who used to be here at the project. Either one person worked here, other people attended here, and they're all doing different things, but I thought it would be awesome if they came back and shared what are some of the things they wish they knew when they were younger. Because I honestly, I'm the youngest of three brothers, of three boys, I should say, and so my two older brothers. And the one thing I learned growing up is that I'll let them make mistakes, and I won't follow their example. And I'll look like the smart one, right? I'll let them be dumb so I can be smart. And anyone here who is like the baby of a family knows what I'm talking about. Let them get in trouble so you learn. There's something about people going ahead of you and learning from their mistakes and learning from their successes. That's kind of where we're at. But I want to start this off with a question, first of all. And so if you're watching online, hey, I didn't welcome you yet. It's great having you online. Can you read this? Yeah, right? It's a little bit more difficult to read. Now, it's a font called Sans Forgetica. It's actually developed by Google by a group of font designers and psychologists. And what they did is they designed it using this principle called desirable difficulty. The idea is this, is that they know that if it's hard enough to get you to read something or do something, if there's a desired difficulty in front of you, then you actually are better at remembering certain things and learning certain things. So they designed this for a lot of students, and they have proven over and over again, writing things in this font, Sans Forgetica, you can literally Google it, you'll find the fonts, will actually help people retain information better than using a normal font, because it forces your brain to stop. And the idea is this, is that it tricks your brain into failing to recognize what you're reading right away, forcing it into greater focus, so you get desirable difficulty. You don't want to make it too hard that you're never able to accomplish it, but you want to make it hard enough that you're not able to get it on the first pass. You got to sit back, you got to actually figure out what is it trying to say. The idea is this, is that failing actually helps you learn. And what I wish I would have known as I finish up this series is this. I wish I would have known that sometimes you need to fail in order to actually learn, grow, and live. I don't know about you, but growing up, there was this idea that you don't want to fail at life. You don't want to become a failure. You don't want to end up at a certain point in your life and look back and going, oh my goodness, look at all the regrets I have. We don't want to fail. No 2-year-old wakes up going, I can't wait to grow up and be a total failure. No one does. Well, hopefully that's not you. And one of our biggest fears, especially at this age, is failing. It's not making it. It's those dreams. I was talking to a few people in the lobby afterwards, some of our volunteers and their family. They're obviously an awesome family because all 3 of them are serving here. But they were saying, I was asking, what did you want to be as a kid? And they asked me what I want to be as a kid. And I think a lot of us, it's like we don't want to fail at those dreams that we have, the hopes that we have. But sometimes you need to fail in order to actually learn, live, and grow. So this guy, Mark Manson, you may have read his book or know the book, The Art of Not Giving a Fudge, okay? And this is what he said. We can be truly successful only at things we're willing to fail at. It's a different way of putting it. Now, Jesus put it this way, and maybe you didn't catch this, and maybe there's a bit of a stretch for some of you, but hear me out. Jesus said something fairly similar. He said this, if you cling to your life, you will lose it. If you let go of your life, you'll save it. And you're like, wait, Thomas, he's talking about giving up your life, but let me ask you a question. Or let me point something out. Failure has this way of getting you to finally let go of your ego. Finally getting you to let go of the safety, the safety net and the comfort zones. Failure has a way of humbling you. And it's when we begin losing some of our ego and losing some of those things that we actually begin to live. And I think when it comes especially to the Christian life, it's only when we begin losing ourselves that Jesus even says that's when you start finding yourself. And I think this is what failure does, and it's true. Now, whether you fail on purpose because you just made terrible mistakes or by accident, failure doesn't actually have to be a bad word. It has everything to do with actually how you harness that failure. Now, I want to tell you a story. It's found in the Bible. It's about this guy named Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was one of the youngest. It's found in this book called Genesis, which is the beginning of the Bible. Genesis literally means beginning. So if you go to the front of the Bible, you pass the table of contents and all the weird notes, you'll get in there right in Genesis. And in chapter 37, now this story spans 10 chapters. So I'm obviously going to read every word of those 10 chapters for you tonight. No, let me just summarize it for you. It's about this guy named Joseph and his brothers. Joseph was a very favored child. It even says it right in the beginning in chapter 37. It says this, Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. Funny story. My wife, sometimes I got 3 kids and she'll whisper to one of my kids, you're my favorite. But she does that to a different kid every day. I think it depends on how they're treating her. But anyways, he literally was the favorite. Joseph was the favorite. And honestly, his life was pretty interesting because his life was full of failures that were actually out of his control. He didn't actually really do anything that made him fail. It's like he tried to living the right life, and every single time something good would happen, something bad would happen. And so he caught his brothers doing something, so he told on them, and so what happened, his brothers hated him. But the reason why he was so favored is because, like you said, Joseph's dad had him in his old age, and so his dad got him this really nice fancy coat. And so what did his brothers do? Well, any brother do. They actually tried to murder him. They actually threw him in a pit and left him to die. But when he really didn't die, what they did is they actually sold him to slavery. Joseph didn't do anything. He didn't do anything. The circumstances around his life forced him into slavery, and he became a slave. But here's the thing, even as a slave, he did really well. He was brought into this ruler's home, and it was really good. Everything's going really well. He's put in charge of a lot of things. And so what happened? Well, his wife, Potiphar's wife, I should say, accused him of rape when Joseph didn't. In fact, this girl wanted his body because it literally said he was a handsome man. So probably like, think of me, you know? And anyways, and so it said Potiphar's wife was kind of like, hey, let's get a little frisky. And he's like, no, like, I can't do that to my ruler. He's entrusted me with his home. How could I do this to his wife, to his lover? You're crazy. And so it says it went on day after day, and finally, she like grabbed him by the neck and was like, yo, boy, you and me, we got to do this. And Joseph's like, girl, no, you crazy. And so he runs away and rips something off him and accuses him of raping her. And so he gets thrown into prison. He gets thrown into prison, something he didn't do at all. So what does he do in prison? He literally becomes a model prisoner. Nothing is getting this guy down. He just keeps going at it and doing the right thing. And so these two servants, different ones, they come and they're like, hey, listen, I had a dream. I need you to interpret. He interprets one. And he tells the guy, it was a bit of a bad news kind of dream. He interprets it, and the guy ends up, he dies. But he forgot about Joseph, so he got his. And anyways, the second guy interprets his dream, and he actually gets out of prison, but it says that Joseph was left in prison and forgotten about for the next 2 years. Joseph had done nothing wrong. And then all of a sudden, something happened to Potiphar, and he had a dream, and no one could explain it, and the guy who was in prison with Joseph was like, hey, wait a second, I know a guy. And it says that Potiphar had totally forgotten about him, and Joseph comes up, he interprets the dream, and it all goes really well. And in fact, Joseph is given rulership over a huge section of his kingdom. It was incredible. And then his brothers, years later, end up showing up because there's a famine in the land. And they show great care for their new younger brother, a care that they never showed to Joseph. And he made amends with them. He brought them all into safety at the end of the story. See, here's the thing. Here's the point of Joseph's life. Joseph saw circumstances out of his control, but not out of God's control. All these failures that were out of his control. He's still like, you know what? I'm not in control of it, but I'm going to use it. I believe that God's in control. But we always forget his brothers. We like Joseph, but we forget his brothers. Here's the thing. His brothers represent the kind of people who failures are in their control, but they just decide to compound the problem. So it says, his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. Basically meaning they literally hated him. You know, there's a difference between like putting a snake in your brother's boot and then selling him off to slavery. They hated him. And so here's the thing though, when they sold him off to slavery, they told their father that Joseph had actually been killed. And so they take a failure, a bad decision, and they end up compounding that failure with more failure. And they dealt with it in a terrible way. They leveraged it badly, but there was a turning point in their story. There was a turning point, and it seemed like they'd made amends with Joseph. They made amends with their mistakes. They actually became honest with Joseph at the end of the story. But here's the thing. Before that, though, Joseph's brothers saw their failure as something to hide and compound rather than hand over to God. See, instead of confronting, confessing, and recalibrating in their failure, they decided to just keep making bad moves. That's a weird thing about failure. Failure has this way of like locking us into something, but failure doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's all about what we do with it. Let me ask you, when was the last time you failed? You're like, well, my mom tells me every day. When was the last time you failed? When was the last time that something didn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out, or it didn't work out the way you wanted it to work out? When was the last time failure was in your control, or whether it was not in your control? When was the last time you failed? And I get it, it's hard to admit it, because when I say that, what comes up is shame. It's embarrassment. Your ego starts fighting it. It's the kind of that shadow you've been running away from. I don't want to talk about my failure, because then you're talking about how I don't measure up. Failure sucks. No one likes talking about it. It's probably because we've come to believe a lot of myths about failure. Myths that sound like this: life is successful once failure is defeated. Despite the fact that, listen, life is not linear. Life isn't like, there's not anyone who's just like, from the day I was born to the day I died, I was like, it is all good. Like, life doesn't work that way. It never has. It requires learning. And learning means that you have to be confronted with not knowing, which means that you need to be confronted with some sort of failure. You have to reach failure in order to learn, to grow, and to live. You have to. That's the way it works. Don't believe me? Watch me try to run an 8-kilometer run. If I ever want to push past something, you've got to reach failure. That's what life is about. In order to live, that's the way it works. If you stop failing, you've stopped living. We believe myths like this: well, God must be upset with me because I didn't get what I want. He didn't really turn it out the way, or I obviously messed up. He's punishing me. I've walked outside of his will. All these people's like, what if I make a mistake? I'm like, well, God's not going to be like, oh my goodness, I didn't plan for this. Because it was, of course, your perfection that saved you by your grace. No, wait, that's not how it went, right? It's almost as if God understands that we live in this human experience where it literally requires us to come to grips with where sometimes we don't measure up. But the other part of that too is, what if I told you that part of God's will is for you actually be confronted with failure? And we'll get to that in a little bit, but here's, a little bit of foreshadowing here. You'll never actually really discover what God has in store for you until you come to grips with what's not in store for you in his will. Failure is a part of life. It doesn't mean that you've walked out of God's will. What if I told you that failing is like, it doesn't mean you've walked out of it. You're probably right in God's will. It requires that. It requires moments where you make mistakes. It requires moments where you're like, I thought this was the case, now it's not. It requires moments where I had a terrible relationship with someone, and I'm pretty sure God's angry with me, and God's like, listen, it's not like I didn't see this coming. It's not like I'm surprised now I don't know what to do, and it's like, now we can shape you in this. To think failure is beyond God means that your God is way too small. We believe myths like this: failure is weakness. You're right, because babies are so weak. Think about it. It's crazy that they can't come out of the womb knowing how to talk, walk, or do algebra. Total idiots, right? Listen, it's not weakness. It's called learning. It's called growing. If you stop failing, it's a good indication you've actually stopped learning. Myths like, well, it's an enemy. Is it really an enemy, though? Is it an enemy if it helps you figure out who you are and who you're not? Is it an enemy if it's often a catalyst to incredible discoveries about God, about the world, and about yourself? Is that really an enemy? Well, what if I don't accomplish what others have? What if I don't have all these things by 25 or by 30? Well, did you hear the one about that power couple on Instagram? I don't know if you heard about them. They have book deals, they got a huge home, they both look super hot. Perfect marriage, and got a lot of money, and they're actually running a marriage conference they charge hundreds of dollars for, and they just got divorced. Oh, you don't know which one? Oh, because there's like 4 or 5 of them during COVID that got divorced. Here's the reality. We often feel failure is a bad word because we think we should have done more, should be doing more, and that we should be more. But mostly because all we're doing is comparing ourselves to other people. Life doesn't work that way. Your timeline is your timeline. All of us become us in different ways, through different experiences, and at different times. Listen, God made you. God is for you. God is in you. Focus on what he's doing in you and let him worry about the other people. And I think sometimes we feel like we're living on a timeline because everyone else's timeline seems to be different than yours. You realize this, there's always gonna be someone prettier, there's always gonna be someone more successful, smarter, funnier, there's always gonna be someone out there that is gonna tell you that you're not enough. And I gotta tell you, there's only one of you, and that's what God cares about, and that's what you should care about. I was just telling someone, again, I think it was the same family actually, in the lobby. They have a new report now. It's like I think over 58% of young adults are now still living at home by the age of 30, which has skyrocketed over the last decade and two. You know why? Because things are harder out there. It also means I think sometimes people get smarter out there. And part of it is because, listen, everyone else's timeline is different. We believe myths like we should know what could happen in the future. What if it doesn't work out? Well, there's a reason why they say hindsight is 20/20. There's a reason for it. You can only know what you know right now. That's all you're responsible for. Own that. You aren't responsible for knowing how today will play out tomorrow. You're not. If you're making what you think is the best decision you could be making today, then that's what's important. Listen, God is working in your present. That's where he's at. So meet him in your present. And now, I will always look back in my life, and I do this often, and I'd be like, Thomas, you were a total idiot back then. But here's the thing. I didn't know that I was being an idiot back then, but I only know that I made bad decisions back then because I made those decisions. I don't know what I know right now out of nowhere. It's just because I made decisions back then. And some of them are really great decisions. Some of them very bad decisions. You are only responsible for what you know right now. But I think sometimes it's like, what if it doesn't turn out? I'm like, I don't know. I can't answer that. But so many of us are just locked into not failing in the future. And so we don't do anything right now. This guy named Thomas J. Watson, he says this. Would you like me to give you a formula for success? It's quite simple, really. Double your rate of failure. You are thinking of failure as the enemy of success, but it isn't at all. You can be discouraged by failure or you can learn from it. So go ahead and make mistakes. Make all you can. Because remember, that's where you will find success. Thomas Edison, notice that both their names are Thomas? Yeah, pretty smart, right? Anyways, I have not failed 10,000 times, he said. I've not failed once. I've succeeded in proving that those 10,000 ways will not work. When I have eliminated the ways that will not work, I will find the way that will work. 2 Corinthians, it's a book in the Bible in the New Testament, written by this guy named Paul. He says this, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So he says, so now I'm glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. What if it's in that place of weakness, place of failure, where God does some incredible work in your life? So let me ask you, when was the last time you failed? Sorry, let me rephrase that. When was the last time you grew up a bit? That you learned, that you lived, that you took a bit of a risk, that you tried to figure something out? When was the last time? When was the last time you tried something, you explored? About your relationship with God or your relationship with someone or just the idea of relationship with yourself. When was the last time you tried? The story of Joseph and the story throughout Scripture tells us that failure is an essential and normal part of being a person and our spiritual development. It's a piece to it. It's part of it. I'm not asking you to go ahead and fail on purpose. It's like, how many dumb mistakes can I make tonight? That's not what I'm asking you to do. But I'll say someone who hasn't failed probably isn't growing. They're living within safety, within their comfort zone. Because we don't like uncertainty. When was the last time you heard God and had to trust him to come through on something, for example? Every movement in life requires risk. Think about the last relationship you had, and you're like, please don't remind me. Think about it. Whether it was good or it was bad. What did you learn? What'd you learn about relationships? What'd you learn about yourself? What'd you learn through it all? And maybe it didn't work out, but what'd you learn in it? Or do you just decide to kind of put your head under, the ground, and you just don't learn from your mistakes and bring the old baggage into your new relationships? So you either learn from failure, or you just let it compound into more failure. How about your last job? Maybe you had a job you hated and didn't really work out the way you wanted it to. What did you learn from it? Maybe you were in a job that you did love. What did you learn from it? I remember when I transitioned here in Edmonton a little over 6 years ago, I was in a job that was comfortable, and taking on this job was a huge risk. And for a while, I looked back on the old job and going, oh my goodness, I can't believe that, blah, 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 blah. Until I grew up a little bit, matured a bit, got a little bit wiser, and I thought to myself, I'm very thankful for that job I had because of the things I learned through it. See, if we don't look at something that didn't work out very well as an enemy to us, as a failure, we don't begin to learn from it, all we do is carry the baggage in. Instead of recognizing it could be an incredible way that God shapes us and moves us towards what he has for us today. We avoid it because, like I said, it brings to the surface the shadow that we're always trying away from, our weaknesses, our regrets, scared of having nothing to show. Here's the thing, instead of seeing failure as an enemy, what if we started seeing our failure as a bit of an ally, as a friend, to our spiritual and to our personal development? Because here's what failure does. You read any leadership book, you talk with anyone who's really had to grapple with failure, and they'll probably tell you a lot of these things. They'll tell you that failure, first of all, humbles you. And for your personal development, this is incredible. And for your spiritual development, it's actually essential. Psalm 25:9 says, he leads the humble in doing right. He teaching them his ways. Throughout Scripture, you find that God leads the humble of heart, not those who are prideful. Failure has this way of reminding you who you are versus who you think you are. And being humble allows you to begin being teachable and reachable again, to think well of others, to maybe take off the ego a little bit, take off the pride, and begin making those adjustments. That's what failure does. We all hate it. Here's the thing. Everyone loves the word humble. Everyone wants to be humbled until you find out that in order to be humbled, you've got to be humiliated. It's the way it works. It humbles you. Second thing it does is it frees you. Proverbs 11:2 says, pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. See, wisdom is the application of knowledge. You ever met someone who knows a lot, but they're as dumb as bricks? So wisdom, we all want to be wise, and we need to grab knowledge. But here's the thing, though. In order to have wisdom, it's the right application of knowledge. And the thing about failure is this, is that it actually frees us. It frees us in a sense of going, no one's got expectations on me anymore. I've already failed. I've kind of maybe hit rock bottom a little bit. I didn't get what I wanted. All these people's expectations, they're now hit the rock bottom. And there's something actually very freeing about that. It gives you a chance to reassess where you're at in life. A chance to reassess what you did and what you didn't do with zero expectations on yourself or anyone on you. And it frees you to begin moving again. There's something very freeing about failing. It teaches us. Proverbs 12:15, fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to others. One of the hardest things to do sometimes is to take advice from other people. When you fail, I feel it's like one of the best times where most of us are pretty open to hearing other people's voices. It's the only time where it's just like, Mom, Dad, you were right. You ever had those moments? Or those moments where you're just like, I'm going to do it my way, that's the way I'm going to go at it, and then it kind of blows up in your face and you're like, I probably should have listened to them. Failure has a way of teaching us, not just of kind of like what we've learned through the process, but I think it actually allows us to begin hearing from other people, to be taught again. It also focuses us. If you cling to your life, you will lose it. If you let your life go, you'll save it. This is what I mean by it focuses us. It actually eliminates and simplifies life. What was actually most important? What do I actually need and what do I not need? What I mean by this is that it eliminates the extra parts of our life so we can actually focus in and going, what do I want my life to be about? What part of this came out that was really good? What are the things I just don't have to deal with? It focuses us. It also helps us. Psalm 139:14, thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. I don't always feel that way. Because I'm like, could you have just made me a little more simple? Because I kind of want to know how I'm made. Should I be doing that? Should I not be doing this? Failure actually gets us closer to finding out who we are, especially when it comes into relationship with God. There are these moments, and it needs to happen in your 20s, where you begin becoming, and you've heard me say this already tonight, where you start confronting who you are versus who you think you are. And you begin discovering who you really are versus the lie you've been believing about yourself. And failure is that. Failure helps you recognize, maybe I'm not as together as I thought I was. Maybe the ways and that I believe about God are not the way that my life lines up. Or maybe I thought I was good at this, but maybe I'm not very good at that. Or it's like, oh my goodness, I never knew I was good at that and actually really enjoyed it. Failure has a way of helping us become who we are. So maybe you're here tonight. Maybe you're watching online, and you're actually not where you thought you'd be in life. You feel as though you failed something or you failed someone. You're scared about what's next. You're worried about the future. If I were you, and honestly, I have been in your shoes, and I will again be in your shoes again at some point. Here's what I've done in the midst of failure, and this is where I'm going to kind of finish it off. If you're in the midst of failure, if you're watching this, if you're here, or you know someone who's just like, I'm not where I wish I was. It's not where I hoped I would be. Or I made a mistake, whether it was you're doing or someone else is doing. What do you do? 3 very simple things. First is this, is you develop some gratitude. I won't spend a lot of time on this because Pastor Brett, he spoke on this last week, and so you can go check it out. He did an awesome job. But let me ask you, what are you thankful for? The first thing you need to do when you've hit rock bottom, when you've hit a place of failure, when you have come to a place where you've been confronted with something and you didn't expect, the first thing is, what are you thankful for? Here's the thing. Gratitude and fear have a really hard time existing in our brain, our heart, and our soul at the same time together. When you're fearful about the future, when you're fearful about your failure, when you're fearful about what is happening, when you begin becoming thankful for what you have, for God and for the people around you, it's a very, very hard time for fear to live in the same brain. It's hard for fear to reside in your soul when you give gratitude, give thanks. Give thanks. Second is this, own your failure and learn from it. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? You think of Joseph, right? Like he sells a slave. He's like, what went wrong? He's like, it was not my doing. Maybe I should have offered him my really pretty coat. I don't know. What do I do? I wonder if Joseph at that point was just like, it wasn't my fault. I just got to own, I'm in my situation. What am I going to do with it? Maybe his brothers at a point where they actually repented of their sin and they actually came to grips with what they did. At some point they had to own, I did that. I could have literally killed my brother and I broke my dad's heart. Own it. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Was it tactics? Was it focus? Do you need to ask someone for forgiveness? Do you need to begin releasing someone? What did you learn about yourself? Maybe ask yourself, who was part of that process? Are you getting help and wisdom in your life? Are there good people surrounding you? Are the people who are wanting to push you towards what God has for you? Are people pushing you towards God's best for you? Do you have people pushing you towards discovering who you are? Do you have people who are holding you back? Who's around you? Or are you only using people as a comparison trap for you? Who do you need to stop following on Instagram or TikTok or whatever the kids use these days? MySpace. Like, what do you need to stop? What do you need to readjust? What do you need to realign? Who do you need to unfollow? What do you need to do? Lastly, you need to try again. Don't ever stop trying. Keep going. Listen, I tried to do this. Even it's like I tried to read my Bible, but I can't do it. Who cares if you failed? I don't care. Try again. Do it again. If you're like, I got into a relationship and it turned out bad and I made tons of bad decisions, learn from it, own it, readjust and try again. Get the healing you need, but try again. Here's a secret: small steps. In your relationships, in jobs, in renewing trust with someone, in just traveling these days, small steps. Just small steps. Put it out there. And you have good people around you, and you have good people who are ahead of the game. Try again. Don't stop. Put your hat in the ring, put your foot back in, and try again. What if this is a way that God helps you discover how he's made you and what he's doing in your life? Here's the crazy thing. When God created the heavens and the earth, this isn't my notes, so when God created heaven and earth, it says that it was chaos. And it says that the Spirit of God came and created order out of chaos. When Jesus came as a baby, it was chaos. This came after years and years of war. And he comes in the most chaotic fashion, a baby. He doesn't come as this like crazy angel just slicing people's heads off, right? He comes as a baby in chaos to create order. When the Holy Spirit descended on the church, the early church, they were running away in fear. They had no idea what was next, and they felt like they had failed. And they were told, just go and pray. And the Holy Spirit descended. And like fire, Christ spread through the New Testament in the first century church, and you were the result of that moment. Oftentimes it's in chaos where God does his best work, if we let him. If you're in the midst of failure, can I tell you, go and pray. Go seek God. Do it. And try again. If you ever, Psalm 139, I mentioned it once, it says this: where can I go from your presence? There's nowhere I could go. Whether you're in the depths or in the mountaintops right now, there's no place where God is not. There's this one quote that sticks out to me. I stuck out for years. I want to share it with you tonight. I think it's fitting. And it says this: never let success get to your head, and never let failure get to your heart. And let me remind you of this. His grace is all you need. And his power works best in weakness. Where you're weak, he's made strong. Do you mind if we pray? And then we're going to go into a time of worship together. God, I thank you that you are never done with us. It says that you were faithful to complete the work you started in us. And I think so often we feel like we should have everything together, but life is not that way. And I'm learning that. And I hope that we hear that you are not looking for perfect people. You are looking for people. Just people who are willing to listen, wait, try, risk. That God, that you are faithful to complete the work in us over the years. And God, may we hear that call of in the midst of failure, in the midst of chaos, to pray and to wait for you. And to know that God, in those places where we feel like we don't measure up, that is where you are made most strong. For those in the midst of failure who feel shame and who feel embarrassment, how can I show my face again? How can I do this again? Whether it's at work or in a relationship, or it's failing a relationship somewhere, or whatever it is. I pray, God of all comfort, that you comfort their heart and their soul. You speak peace to their mind. That God, as they listen to you, that they would learn what you're trying to do. Yeah, they would learn from the mistake. They would make those adjustments. But again, they would hear you say, keep going. My work is not done yet in you, and I'm faithful to complete it. To those who've been in a position where failure has been out of their control and everything seems to not be working in their timeline. Nothing's working the way that they would hope it would. Maybe it's extreme disappointment. Maybe it's just incredible frustration. I don't know what it is. God, I just pray also you speak peace to their minds as well and comfort for them. And that they would hear you speak what you spoke to Joseph, what you speak to me, what you speak to people all over. My work is not done in you yet. I'm faithful to bring it to completion. May we be the people in the midst of our circumstances that we can't control. Hand it over and trust that God, you are still in control. Amen. Why don't you stand as Brett leads us into time of worship.
Worthy of every song we could ever sing, worthy of all the praise we could ever bring. we continue here, we're just going to lead you guys in a couple more songs. And for those of you who are here and for those of you who are still tuning in right now online, just as we were coming into this Sunday, this is kind of like it's Labor Day long weekend. It's kind of like our last Sunday before we officially start the fall. And I know a lot of you guys are going to be going back to school if you haven't started school already. And just with the summer that we've been through, I think all of us, there's just so much uncertainty right now. And so whether we're working or we're in school, I just feel like coming into the fall and coming into the rest of this year, it just can be a really challenging time. And with this worship set, though, how we wanted to end the services, we just wanted to kind of create a space for you guys to almost be able to just reset. And if you've been thinking about this upcoming semester and the only emotions or thoughts that you're really feeling are ones of just fear or doubt or just worry because of everything that's going on in the world right now and everything that's kind of happening, we just want this time for you to be a time where you just take that stuff that you're carrying and you just give it to God. And almost to for all of us together to just recommit ourselves to Him in the sense that we're saying to Him, God, I trust you. I might not know what my semester is going to look like. I might not know where my next paycheck is going to come from right now. Or whatever that is for you, whatever kind of that fear, that worry that you're facing, I just think this would be an awesome time for us to begin to trust God again and to recommit ourselves to Him. And so just as we continue to play and as we continue to sing, if you haven't done that yet and you just coming in here, you just felt like that heavy weight, because that just wears you down, when you're carrying that level of worry and fear. That just gets so heavy over time, and the best thing we can do is just give that stuff to God. And I think in moments of worship, those can be kind of the best times to do that, to just get lost in a worship set like this and just pray that prayer to God of God, I trust you. I trust you with my life. I trust you with my work. I trust you with my school. And so I just want to invite you to do that tonight as we continue to play. You're the voice inside my head. Don't give up. Don't let go. Don't lose trust. Don't lose hope. And you can have all my fears, God. And you can have all my sins. And you can have all my weakness. And I know you're with me till the very end. And you know me, and I know you. You're the God who calms all my storms. You're the voice inside my head. Don't give up. Don't let go. Don't lose trust. Don't lose hope. You can have all my fears. You can have all my sins. You can have all my weakness. And I know you're with me till the very end. And you can have all my fears, God. You can have all my sins. You can have all my weakness. And I know you're with me till the very end. And I know you're with me till the very end. And I still believe there's nothing more beautiful than the love you have for me. I still believe there's nothing more beautiful than the love you have for me. I still believe there's nothing more beautiful than the love you have for me. I still believe. 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 So God, I just pray for anyone who was just coming in here tonight and was just feeling that heaviness of uncertainty, feeling that heaviness of fear and worry. God, I pray that you would help all of us to just learn what it means to trust you in this new season that we're starting this semester. I think for so many of us, this wasn't really the fall that we were expecting. We just went through a summer full of things that we weren't expecting. But God, I just thank you that no matter what we kind of go through, no matter what kind of curveballs life throws at us, God, I thank you that we can always turn to you. And the hope that we have in you, it's something that can never be taken away from us. So, Father, I just thank you for that truth tonight. And I just pray that as a young adult community that we would just stand upon that truth. And that we would just move forward this semester with just a confidence and just a certainty, God, that can only be found when we just fully devote ourselves to you and trust you. So help us to do that, God. Help us to do that this semester moving forward. But Father, I just thank you for this time of just being able to sing to you and just worship you. It's your name we pray.